ادخلوا الجنة أنتم وأزواجكم تحبرون يطاف عليهم بصحاف من ذهب وأكواب وفيها ما تشتهيه الأنفس وتلذ الأعين وأنتم فيها خالدون وتلك الجنة التي أورثتموها بما كنتم تعملون لكم فيها فاكهة كثيرة منها تأكلون إن المجرمين في عذاب جهنم خالدون لا يفتر عنهم وهم فيه مبلسون وما ظلمناهم ولكن كانوا هم الظالمين ونادوا يا مالك ليقض علينا ربك قال إنكم ماكثون لقد جئناكم بالحق ولكن أكثركم للحق كارهون أم أبرموا أمرا فإنا مبرمون أم يحسبون أن لا نسمع سرهم ونجواهم بلى ورسلنا لديهم يكتبون قل إن كان للرحمن ولد فأنا أول العابدين سبحان رب السماوات والأرض سبحان رب السماوات والأرض رب العرش عما يصفون فذرهم يخوضوا ويلعبوا حتى يلاقوا يومهم الذي يوعدون وهو الذي في السماء إله وهو الذي في السماء إله وفي الأرض إله وهو الحكيم العليم وتبارك الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض وما بينهما وعنده علم الساعة وإليه ترجعون وتبارك الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض وما بينهما وعنده علم الساعة وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد
That's better. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for coming here today. We know that this was very short notice as we opened up the doors to Al-Mahdi Institute. Shaykh wanted to relay his thanks to everyone and also to all those online as well. This is primarily an online event. We will have a short question and answer session after. And if you looked at the advertised website, you can post your questions on there, and hopefully what we'll do is we'll compile all the similar questions and pose them to Shaykh dependent on the topic of the day. And there may be some instances where we don't ask that particular question on that day and ask it on another night. So can we welcome Shaykh with a loud salawat.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين ولعنة الله الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. The topic that we have chosen for this series of lectures this Muharram is around the notion of Mahdi, Mahdiism, and in particular Imam Mahdi. We want to explore this topic from fundamentally or primarily from two aspects. One is the person of Imam Mahdi and the Mahdi-centric beliefs and the structures that have been created within the faith. That will entail trying to arrive at an understanding of how much of the things that are designed around Al-Mahdi are authentic and are useful at a pragmatic level. This will also discuss the possibility of the birth of Al-Mahdi, his existence at present. It will also discuss his purpose for us at present. This will be done in the light of, well, what is Mahdiism supposed to be in any way? At a pragmatic level, what purpose does it serve? How do these particular beliefs around Mahdi and the authority structures that are created in the name of Mahdi, what purpose do they serve? The next part of the talks will be on the whole notion that Mahdi will bring a different religion. So we will ask a question, well, what will be the religion of Al-Mahdi? Will it be different to his grandfather? Because that will be the charge leveled against him by the ulama according to the popular narrations that we have. If he brings a different religion, then what will his religion look like? How can we envisage a different religion when it comes to Mahdi, especially since he's the culminating glory of the message of his grandfather? Now, as we commence these talks, we want to know from a very broad perspective, well, what is going on? there is this vast creation that God has created. And in that, we have awoken. We are opening our eyes and beginning our inquiry. And we are asking, well, what is it all about? Is there any lead within the religious texts, within the Quran and Hadith literature that gives us an understanding of what is going on? Can we then see a notion of Mahdi carried within this broad understanding? We also want to take a rational approach that does this thing make sense in its own self, all of these inquiries? Does Mahdiism make sense in its own self? We also want to ask this question today as we commence these talks, that what is the nature of belief in something? Should we believe in something for the sake of belief? Or is belief supposed to be productive? Is a belief supposed to lead us to a particular objective? Is it oriented around an objective? Does it lead us somewhere? Or is the belief for the sake of belief? I believe that Boris Johnson has a cup of tea at 7 o'clock in the morning. That belief may not do much for me, but I need to believe that he does have a cup of tea at 7 o'clock in the morning. But does that belief assist in any way towards the attainment of a good Brexit or not? And by the way, when I make comments like this, you can smile. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That just shows that we are all present and here. Yes, we're not waiting for the Maddy to come and shut me up. The one thing Al-Mahdi can do is to just remove people like me and say, look, let's have proper talks instead. So now, we ask this question, that God has created such a phenomenal creation. The date of the universe, from our understanding of the universe so far, this particular one is 14 billion years. The observable universe is so vast and it's moving so fast that it is moving faster than the speed of light. It's just stretching out. And that's just the observable universe. The observable universe has a universe beyond it that we can't see, because it's expanding at such an alarming rate that its light can never reach us. And everything else whose light has not reached us, we can't see. This phenomenally grand universe defies logic as far as we understand logic. Is it expanding? And if so, expanding into what? We thought universe was an expression of space and time. You need space to expand into. But if it is expanding and creating space and time, then what is it expanding into? You can see the frailty of our minds. The very basic questions, we can't grasp them. And now we feel that the Big Bang model of the universe may be an inadequate appreciation of the nature of the universe. It may not be the beginning of existence at large. It may be the beginning of our universe, which we have yet to observe as it is. In fact, the hadith of the later Imams drew a phenomenally different picture, and it's vast, the universe. They say, whatever you can see and whatever is available to sense perception is what is termed as Sama ad-Dunya, the first universe. In relation to the universe that encompasses it, this unending universe of yours is like a small ring that is thrown within an unending desert. Now imagine a God who has created something so phenomenal. In that we awaken. And we ask, well, what is it all about? Reason cannot make sense that it is all about a man coming, killing all the evil people, and the good people rejoice for a little while, and then Qiyamah comes. It doesn't make sense. It is way too grand for the human story to be so mundane and so meaningless. Whatever Mahdiism is, it must be something phenomenal, must be something connected with the fabric of the cosmos. It must be as meaningful as the rest of God's existence is. If we cannot fathom the meaning of Mahdiism, then at least not let us confine it. At least let us have that humility to say that I cannot understand the true nature of it. But I do understand one thing, that whatever it is, it has to be directly in sync with the purpose that God is trying to achieve from the creation of the wider cosmos. Then we look at the khilafah of the human being, the stewardship of the human being. And we said this human being has been created with such a phenomenal aptitude. Look at us the way we are. Nothing can restrain us. Nothing can contain us. As soon as a hurdle is placed before us, we break it and surpass it. This human being is not even a dot on the face of this earth. Yet, the human being has been able to understand that the life of the universe is 14 billion years old. It must be much more. But the audacity of the human being to put an age limit to it. Can you imagine how grand this human being is? They are talking about parallel universes. They are talking about space-time, warping space, defying the speed of light, going beyond the speed of light, going into another dimension and traversing from galaxy to galaxy. All these phenomenal ideas within that little gray matter enclosed within a small skull. Can you imagine how phenomenal the human being is? The khilafah of human being seems to be represented in the human being's defiance to any limit that is placed before the human being. In the human being's denial to surrender to any force of nature. In the human being's denial to be limited in any way whatsoever. They say to him, if God wanted you to fly, He would have given you wings. He created wings. They said to the human, if God wanted light at night, He would have created another sun. They created hundreds and millions of suns at night. They said to him, death is destined. He brought about the cure. They said to him, God feeds. He started feeding himself. Look at this defiant nature of the human being. There is nothing that bars it. There is a certain dynamism in the human being that is directly in line with existence. The whole of existence is flowing. The human being is flowing. There is no arrest to his growth, to his inquiry, to his curiosity. In line with that, any notion of the ultimate end of humanity can only be one that befittingly states to the human being that you will predominate as the master of the whole of the universe, if not more, and you yourself will create as many. Think about this carefully. If the human race were to be allowed to live for another 1,000 years, what will they not achieve and what will they not conquer? Not only intellectually are they purging themselves from the veils of ignorance and breaking new limits and crossing new frontiers. Morally, they're becoming refined. Spiritually, they're becoming centered. There is a beautiful process in this khilafah that they are becoming the ultimate. In line with that then, the notion of Mahdi immediately we can state cannot be a limiting force. It has to be a force of liberation and an utmost force of growth. This is what Mahdiism ought to be like. It can't be otherwise. This is our rational inquiry. At the very outset, we are observing the universe, the nature of the human being, and our reason cannot admit to any end of humanity being less than what is befitting for a state of glorious humanity. I think everybody would agree to that. Having said this, let us go within the texts to see if we get some lead into what is happening on the face of this earth and what Mahdiism is all about, having set up the Mahdi in the way that we have set him up right now. I'm going to take assistance of the Hadith literature and the Quranic verses. In terms of good and evil, as far as our inquiry is concerned, we have to admit to our inability to know accurately what the texts are trying to tell us. Rather than making sense of them by forcing sense upon them within a particular interpretive framework, it would be better for us to admit our inability to understand the fullness of what is going on, so that the inquiry can become a meaningful inquiry. So if we look at the text, Imam Sadiq Salamullah alayhi talks about the creation of intellect and the creation of ignorance. He states that the first thing that God creates from the spirited being, from the right of the throne, is the intellect. He says to the intellect, retreat, it does so. It says to the intellect, advance, it does so. God says, I have not created the creation greater than you. I have given you predominance upon the rest of my creation. Then God creates ignorance from the dark seas, from the left of the arsh. Of course, that doesn't mean the people who are left-handed are any less than people who are right-handed. I know we have these biases. I just wanted to clarify this. He says to ignorance, retreat. It does so. He says to ignorance, advance. The ignorance fails to advance. It is not within its nature. God says to it, you have behaved with arrogance. And then God curses it. Then God makes for intellect many qualities that embellish intellect. Arrogant ignorance looks at God and says, but I am the twin of intellect. You have honored intellect with so many qualities. Give me its equal. So God gives ignorance its equal qualities. Now, from the qualities that are given to intellect and the qualities that are given to ignorance, Imam Sadiq says, one is given faith, the other one is given denial. One is given gratitude, the other one ingratitude. One is given knowledge, the other one is devoid of knowledge. One is given contentment, the other one discontentment. One is given charity, the other one is given miserliness. One is given bravery, the other one cowardliness. One is given reliance upon Allah, the other one a state of hopelessness. One is given the enlightenment, the other one is being given the regressive quality of becoming egoistic at every point. We see now that there are two poles that are created at that point. Then we get another hadith after this, in which the Imam says that then God set about creating human beings. He takes dust or clay. These are highly symbolic statements. And he mixes one clay with sweet water and the other with salty water. Then he mixes both of them together. And then he initiates the process of separating one from the other. And he says humanity will be constantly in a struggle where both of these separate from each other. So we are seeing ignorance and intellect, and you are seeing people created from the same substance of sweet water from which the intellect is created and salty water from which ignorance is created. They are mixed together and a process is set about for both of them to separate as life goes on. You find this notion of hell, you find this notion of paradise within the Quran. And we find this struggle between the two poles. We find a struggle between Adam and between Iblis. We find a struggle between Ibrahim and between Namrud. A struggle between Moses and a struggle between the Pharaoh. We have the Prophet Muhammad. We have Abu Jahl. We have Imam Ali. And we have his opponent like Muawiyah. We have Imam Hussein. And we have Yazid, Mahdi and Dajjal. There's a constant struggle. There's a state of duality. And we are seeing, therefore, that something is happening within humanity that is happening within the cosmos at large. You might find this strange, but we have matter and we have dark matter. We have heaven and we have hell. So now Iblis challenges God. And he says, you know this one that you have honored above me? I will lead them all astray, save for a few. God said, in that case, I shall fill the pits of hell with you and them all together. The Quran says, indeed, we have created for hell many jinn and many men. These verses are supposed to incite inquiry as to what is going on. What is truly happening here? Have I got it right? Is it as naively simplistic as I've understood it? Or is there a profound story to be told? And that is to unfold. So we go into this story. We have created for hell many jinn and many men. Imam Ali Salamullah alayhi says in Dua Kumail, you would have turned the fire into a place of safety, but you have taken an oath that you will fill it with jinn and man altogether. We see something else unfolding from within the story of the Quran. It says that at every point, God is bringing out good from the bad. In the Battle of Uhud, the people broke their pledges to the Prophet and they ran to join Abu Sufyan after the defeat at Uhud. The response that Allah gives in the Quran is that the good will be distinguished from the bad. We have yet to know what is going on inside you. And there will be no rest until both of these things are separated from each other. The same story we saw in that hadith, that the clay of one has to separate from the clay of the other. When we look at the Quran, again we see that Nabi Nuh says to Allah, I have preached to them day and night. They are covering their faces, they are plugging their ears. The response comes to Nuh, nobody else will believe in you now. And since nobody else will believe in you anymore, create an ark and aboard it. I shall sail you to safety and I shall destroy everybody else. A cataclysmic event, a real apocalyptic event as far as the bad ones were concerned, and they were all destroyed. Then again with Moses. Moses prays to Allah, "Oh Allah, they will not give birth to any more good people. Now destroy them." Or, "Oh Allah, let them not believe until your chastisement becomes firm for them." Moses again expresses that despair that no good is left there. And then the Pharaoh is drowned. We find this in the Hadees of Imam Ali, which don't know the authenticity of what makes perfect sense. That when he says to a person that I will not kill them, maybe somebody good might take birth from them. But in the story of the Mahdi, we have this Hadees, that the good and the evil will be separated and they will be apart. And that is when the final battle will commence and begin. That there will be no more good coming from evil and no more evil coming from good. They will be set apart. So when we look at this, all of this is making sense somehow. It is coming together. That something is happening. That there are two poles that need to be separated. At this point in time, they are together. They are both evolving hand in hand. The other thing the Quran talks about are the A'immatul Huda, the Imams of guidance, and A'immatul Kufr, the Imams of disbelief. And both of them are working together. The Quran also talks about somebody like the Mahdi. He alludes to it. وَلَقَدْ كَتَبْنَا فِي الزَّبُورِ مِنْ بَعْدِ ذِكْرِ أَنَّ الْأَرْضَ يَرِثُهَا عِبَادِيَ الصَّالِحُونَ. And we have indeed prescribed in the Zabur, after the dhikr. So people say Zabur are the holy books. Dhikr is the revelation with God. Some say dhikr means the Torah and Zabur means the Psalm. In any case, that the earth will be inherited by my righteous servants. Now this does not give the notion of Mahdi as an individual, but it does give the notion of Mahdiism. The prevalence of the absolute beauty of God within the fold of humanity. And on the other hand, God also alludes to another reality. And He says, وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ الَّذِي آتَيْنَاهُ آيَاتَنَا فَانْسَلَخَ مِنْهَا فَأَتْبَعَهُ الشَّيْطَانُ فَكَانَ مِنَ الْغَاوِينَ. Relate unto them the story of the one to whom we gave our verses, our signs, and he threw them away. And then the shaitan followed him and was of those who are misguided. If we wanted, we could have elevated him with our signs. Rather, he decided to stay upon the earth. In the exegy, we find from our Sunni brothers that this may have been a prophet who got the signs of God, but his base desires predominated upon him. And as a result, he was cursed. But he was a person extremely endowed. So we are finding that if there is a Mahdi, a glorious person that will lead humanity to its eventual salvation, there is also his antithesis in a most perfect form on the other side. Now, after looking at this, we then look at the religions and what they have come to do. Every religion that we have found within the folds of humanity have all come to promote goodness of humanity, moral good, intellectual flourishing, and God-centricity. All of them have added to the human growth. Yet at every point, the other aspect has also remained. At one point it's predominated, then the religions come, and then it grows within the ambit of religion itself. You can see that the people who wanted to execute Isa were the people that belonged to religion. They were not outside the religion. You can see the way God curses the people at the time of Isa, who were the scholars of the Jewish faith. You can see how God curses the Muslims within the Quran, who are apparently the followers of the Blessed Prophet. So every time the religions have come, they have come to remind people of goodness. Yet both of these qualities of intellect and ignorance are coexisting side by side. What we are seeing here is that more than an individual, Mahdi is the broad reality that is within the folds of humanity. If we look at the faiths of this world, Hinduism talks about Vishnu, that he will come and bring about a befitting humanity. Buddhism talks about the coming of the Buddha, who would teach proper dharma and how to exist peacefully and in line with the properties of existence that bring about the best within humanity. As far as the Abrahamic faiths are concerned, Judaism talks about the coming of the Messiah, who they say has not come yet, who will gather the people within Israel or Jerusalem, and from there bring about goodness to the rest of the world. The Christians believe that Messiah came, he went, but he will fulfill the prophecy in his second coming. The Muslims believe the same thing, that the Messiah will come and will fulfill the prophecy within the Torah in his second coming. And the Muslims in addition believe we have a belief in the Mahdi, that Mahdi will come prior to Isa, and then Isa will come after the Mahdi during his reign. And Mahdi and Isa will finally bring about peace on the face of this earth. As opposed to that, we have this notion of the Antichrist. In Jewish literature, we have a notion of Dajjal, or the false Messiah. In Christianity, we have the notion of the false Messiah, who will be a pretender, a deceiver, who will deceive. And the description given in the book of Revelation is strikingly similar to the description of the Dajjal within Islam. In Islam, we have the word Dajjal, the one who deceives, who is a deceiver. And of course, we'll talk about Dajjal at great length towards the end. But here, if Mahdi is supposed to bring peace according to the hadith of the Prophet, that the earth will enjoy peace and justice, just as it was filled with tyranny and oppression, how can Mahdi fill the earth with peace and justice until and unless the people of the earth understand the meaning of peace and justice? So from this we see that Mahdiism or Messianism in this way is an ongoing process in which humanity is refining itself and understanding the worth of abiding by the precepts of justice, peace, and equality. So when we go to the Jewish interpretation of the Messiah, we find a threefold interpretation. One is that it is the coming of reformers and the prophets, one after another. And they will push the humanity towards its completion. These are the individuals. And then there will be a final individual, which will be the culminating glory of the trend of Messianism. But at the same time, humanity as a whole has this notion of Mahdiism embedded firm within the core of their being, in which they are evolving towards the good. So if you contrast the Antichrist, you will see that that too exists at the three level. One are individuals that are at the most devastating for humanity's well-being. Two is that completion of the force of evil. And 3 is the general human tendency and waywardness. Now the mistake that we make is that we associate ugliness with the Antichrist. Or we have this monstrous notion of the Antichrist. This is where we are failing. Antichrist, therefore, is the tendency within us of doing as much wrong as we can do right. So when the majority of the world is able to see the plundering of the earth and are careless about it, then that is the Antichrist tendency, which comes through the justification of scientific findings, which are then promoted by human governments. These people do not have distorted features. They are very handsome looking people. They do not lack sophistication in education or expression. They are the most educated people, the most sophisticated in their expression, but they have the ability to deceive. For the world to say there is climate change, we need to do something about it, and the antagonist to say that it's a natural outcome of the cyclic nature of the world, and then to justify abuse of the planet, is the tendency of the Antichrist. The atom is split. It creates energy on the one hand. It creates atomic bombs on the other hand, which are then thrown on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which then kill hundreds of thousands of people. And for generations on end, people are suffering. But it is justified in one way or another. We wage wars, proxy wars. We sell weapons to states that are unjust. They kill defenseless people. But all of this is justified in a very democratic fashion, through a parliament that represents people, a representational democracy. Look at the sophistication that is there. But the work is one which is ungodly and inhumane. Who can say that what we are doing around the world is not inhumane or not ungodly? Then we get, in the name of religion, the fights within Middle East. Syria lies in ruins. Sectarian tensions, political competition of the area, all justified in the name of God and the Prophet. Syria lies in ruins. People are displaced, killed. Children are orphans. Women are raped and taken advantage of. Yet everything is justified within a religious language and by theology of one and all, and especially the Muslims. So the Antichrist is not to be seen as a monstrous figure who doesn't know how to talk or who stutters. Antichrist is intertwined. The Dajjal is intertwined within the Mahdi. And both of them need to tear each other apart and distinguish each other from each other before we can see clearly. The problem right now is that the Messiah or the Mahdi and the Dajjal are coexisting within the ambit of humanity across the board, whether it be within the secular world or it be in the religious world. The same story. The intellect and ignorance mixed together in that dust and that clay. And that dust and that clay is constantly trying to separate itself. But Dajjal is the one who deceives. So now, I'll end today's talk with this, that the first thing we need to understand, that the belief in Mahdi has to be productive at the level of the stewardship of God. It is here that we need to open our minds and say it is not a thing particular to Shia faith or to Muslims. It is a human phenomena in line with the cosmic phenomena. Our job here, therefore, is to understand it accurately and to fulfill our role of trying to understand what is happening and be very clear about it. Hussein Salamullah alayhi was summoned to the office of Walid bin Utbah, a cousin of Yazid, and in his office was Marwan. Now you can see Hussein Salamullah alayhi, he could have secured a lot of gains for himself. He could have pledged allegiance, or he could have diplomatically wiggled out of it, or he could have made a political deal. But Imam Hussein's understanding was very clear. He said, if Islam has become inflicted and infected with Bani Umayyah, then I bid my salam on this Islam. Think about this very carefully. Muawiyah expanded the Muslim empire, didn't he? Imam Hussein did not agree with this expansion because Islam is propagated like the Prophet propagated it, through the mind and through the heart, through rational arguments and through the appeal that it provides for the heart to tend towards God and goodness, not through coercion of the sword. That is why we have almost 2 billion Muslims, but who are ready to kill each other. What sort of surrender to God is that? And this is the living Antichrist within the folds of Islam, as we have the living Antichrist within the folds of Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and secularism. Imam Hussein enters the office. Walid gives news of the death of Muawiyah. Imam Hussein, in a customary fashion, says, indeed we belong to Allah and to Him we return. He said, but Yazid demands your allegiance. Imam says, allow me till tomorrow, and then ask this question of me tomorrow. In the presence of all those in the mosque, isn't that better for you? Walid said, indeed it is better. Imam Hussein was buying time for himself to deliberate it or to make preparations to leave. Marwan says, Walid, if he escapes now, you will not be able to get him again until much blood is shed between the two of you. Kill him. Imam Hussein, enraged, how dare you speak like this to me? Shall you put me to death, or shall he? You have lied. None of you can put me to death. The Dhakirin at this point state that Abbas, in a state of rage, enters within the office. Looking at the rage of Abbas, both Walid and Marwan step away in a state of fear. Imam Hussein says to Abbas, Salamullah alayhi, do not preempt any attack. Imam Hussein is retreating. Marwan says to Walid, you will not find him again. Walid said, I would rather not put him to death and face God on the day of Qiyamah. As Imam returns, the Dhakirin state that Lady Zainab is perplexed. She asks her brother, what came of your meeting with Walid? He said, oh sister, he has asked for the pledge of allegiance. She recalls what she has heard in childhood, that there will come a time when they shall put your brother to death, and those reciting the kalima of the Prophet will be the one who, for the pleasure of God, will kill the grandson of the Prophet. She wept aloud and she said, oh dear brother, has that time come? Ala la'natul al-qawmi dhalimin wa saya'lamu alladhina dhalamu ayya munqalibin yanqalibun. Rahmallah man qara al-Fatiha.
Thank you very much for that, Shaykh. As I mentioned at the start of the program, we'll be taking questions via the website. The website for your reference is www.shaykharif.com/live. We have a question already which has come through. The first question, it's got two parts to it. So from your lecture, it seems that everything has a positive and a negative, and this somewhat seems necessary. Painted a lot of metaphors and analogies, like the use of a hammer to construct something beautiful or to destroy something. And there's this picture of the divine fight against good and evil, the search for truth and true purpose. And it all sounds a little predetermined. Perhaps it is, or if it isn't, then what's the point of Qiyamah? So this divine play is going to happen. What's the point of Qiyamah there? So that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question, and if it isn't predetermined, what happens if we fail to understand peace and justice, because that's what needed for the Mahdi to return? What happens to humanity if we fail to do that? Will the Mahdi never come?
So here we then say that as far as Qiyamah is concerned, we have to admit to our inability to understand things accurately. That is one thing we need to understand. Now, in terms of whatever little we have understood, the way we interpret Qiyamah is that there was a purpose with which God created humanity, in line with what is happening in the cosmos. Everything has two sides. There are two poles to existence. But what was not known was who will be on this side and who will be on that side. So Qiyamah will finally come and distinguish who is on this side and who is on that side and who is in the middle. Can you see that? So what was not determined was Zayd on the right or on the left? Was Amr on the right or on the left? What was determined was that there are two poles. There will be two lot of people in line with what is happening in the cosmos, the intellect and the ignorance. But what was not determined is which particular individual will be on which side. So Qiyamah will come and determine that. Now, will the Mahdi come? The answer is absolutely, because Mahdis have been coming and going all the time, right? Mahdi in terms of the prophets, the imams, because we find that the Jewish texts call every prophet the anointed one, the Messiah. In the Islamic literature, the Dajjal is called, and in Christian literature, the Dajjal is called the Messiah Dajjal Messiah, the deceptive Messiah. Yes, the anointed, deceptive Messiah. And in that verse of the Quran that I read, Dajjal could be that could be an indication towards that supreme intellect, because they said that particular individual who was endowed with that much knowledge could see the arsh, and he instead rejected everything, all that knowledge, and he pursued his vain sort of desires of predominating and possession, but in a very sophisticated way. So the Mahdis are always coming. Now, our failure is that when we try and understand the hereafter, we are not trying to understand it in the way we understand the world. When we talk about Mahdi, this is the end time for humanity or human eschatology. We can interpret this very easy from the way we are and the way we do things. So when we have a university, we always have a rate of success and a rate of failure. And a good university will always predict its rate of success through the increasing number of graduates. Now when we say there is Mahdi and there is Dajjal or there is Christ and Antichrist, it does not necessarily mean equal numbers on both sides. Right? It does not mean antimatter, I don't know what it is. It can be very small but much heavier than matter, for example. So the numbers can fluctuate. There are only very few prisons and few number of people inside the prison. The rest of the people are normal people. But somehow good and evil are balancing themselves all the time, within us and outside of ourselves. So we can predict that yes, humanity is on a trajectory which brings it to a good end. Because this human sentiment, human feelings, humanity cannot rest without finding God and itself. You will see when you say to the people, are you happy to deceive? Everybody will say, well, I am deceptive at times, but it doesn't feel nice within. Majority of humanity belongs to that category. So it seems that Mahdi will be produced and will come. As to when and how, these are the things that cannot be predicted, and they're always open-end questions, because the Prophet said, I will give you signs of which some are certain will happen existentially. The others may happen, may not happen. So they're up for grabs.
So that's a really good segue into the next question. Can I just remind everybody online as well that the questions need to be pertain to the topic we're speaking about today. I have been asked one question, and I'm going to rephrase it so it's actually more suitable. We live in an era of fake news and
of what?
Fake news. So separating truth from falsehood is extremely difficult. We've got people in positions of power who are very persuasive and cover the truth. And you mentioned about climate change. That was a really good example. Pertaining to hadith and narrations, even when mentioning them in your lecture today, you've said, I don't know about the strength of this particular hadith or its suitability of use, but you've said it makes reasonable sense. Do you think that there is a way to distinguish between this good and this good and evil, or this fake news, this deception within our own sources and texts, or do you think outright that we should discard them? It's previously been said that 80% of Shia hadith are non-authentic. So I just want you to just expand on that and keep it relevant to the topic as well.
So what we can do is we have yardsticks through which we can discern the authentic from the inauthentic. One is what the Prophet said. Does it conform with the Quran? If so, take it as authentic. The other yardstick is it rational? Does it make sense in any context? In its own context, outside its own context? Does it make sense in its own self? That's another yardstick. The third thing is the chains of hadith. But I mean, that's not the real distinguishing feature. Because people earlier on, there's a claim that they did construct very accurate chains and introduce things within religion that do not belong in religion. So right now what we have is the Quran and reason. The other thing is this, that we can say, well, it might have made sense in its own context, but in today's context it does not make sense. So it was right for then, not right for now, because human community is always evolving. And it was a contextual instruction given to them. But these are to do with fiqh hadith. But the hadith on theology, it's a difficult task. Any hadith carrying theology that is not in line with the Quran should be held as suspicious. Theology. Any historical event whose authenticity we cannot establish should not be taken on as evidence to derive theology from it, or religious mindset or biases. Now it's a heavy task, but there are many people now who are talking about it, and we are getting somewhere.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that was an appropriate response. If we've got a couple more questions, if we have a little more time. So if each person is capable of having an Antichrist or Antichrist tendencies and general acts or show these tendencies, how do you differentiate between a good person and an evil person? Antichrist tendencies would mean that each person is capable of being or expressing evil acts. So if you've got a person, how do you kind of navigate that person's character or their nature?
You see, what I was trying to say was not that we judge other people. What I was trying to say was it is within the individual themselves. And we need to understand the anti-Christ tendency within our own self, as opposed to judging the other, because everybody is the same. So when we are unjust to our subordinates, due to our upper hand and authority, then that is the Dajjali quality. The justification is brought about, well, I have a right to do this and it's not wrong. Whereas the intuition from within says this is abuse of authority. Can you see that? So that, what I was trying to say was the Antichrist that is within all of us and the Mahdi that is within all of us, we need to clarify this. At times, on certain occasions, the right action is dictated from us. But we, due to fear and insecurity, we fail to commit the right act. And subsequently we justify it. That is the Antichrist tendency within us. Now, obviously, the social political systems as well will carry the Mahdi sort of outlook and the Antichrist, but they're all intertwined. It's like our ulama were saying that there's a hadith from Imam Ali that every household will have an antenna and Dajjal inside it. So now, initially we were cursing the television. At this point in time, the screen is carrying my talk on Mahdi and Dajjal on the screen. So everything has this dual element intertwined within it. It's very difficult to say this is an Antichrist system or this is the Mahdi system. It's very difficult. As the world is acquiring greater sophistication, things are getting very, very blurred. So it's within the self, it's within the economy, it's within the social system, it's within the political system. Both of them are hand in hand. Yeah? So it's not to judge the other, it's to try and just gauge our own self and what we are doing. Yeah?
Okay, and I think our final question for tonight, before we wrap up. So it says, history indicates that various prophets have improved the moral and ethical level of humanity. How can we be assured that the Mahdi can achieve total peace, or is this an illusion we must believe to maintain hope?
No, Mahdi cannot achieve total peace. It's an impossible task. Humanity has to achieve a level of maturity where they can keep the anti-Christic tendencies at bay. Mahdi can't achieve that. If Mahdi was going to achieve that, his grandfather, the Prophet, would have achieved it. No Prophet, no Mahdi, Salamullah, they can achieve that. It is a human struggle in which the living Mahdi, within the ambit of 8 billion people, that have to achieve it. Can you see that? Yeah. And Mahdism is it's like a figure like the Prophet or Einstein that is just taking humanity to that final level. Einstein does not take birth until the ground is set for Einstein and people are ready to receive his teachings. Otherwise, the teachings go to waste. So humanity will propel itself towards the individual Mahdi, an individual Dajjal. And then both of the human and human trend will culminate in two individuals that will then make them take the final leap. Yeah? Thank you. Rahmallah man qara al-Fatiha.